The wind howled through the tall buildings of the city as night fell, carrying with it a sharp chill that made even the busiest pedestrians quicken their steps toward the warmth of home. Snowflakes drifted from the sky, soft and white, but to those without shelter, they were nothing more than icy reminders of loneliness and hunger. On a quiet corner of a bustling street, under the dim glow of a flickering street lamp, sat a young woman with disheveled hair and hollow eyes, cradling a small bundle in her arms. Her name was Maya, though no one stopped long enough to ask, and the bundle she held was her infant daughter, Emma, whose weak cries were muffled by the thin blanket wrapped around her. Maya's lips trembled as she pressed her child closer to her chest, whispering promises she wasn't sure she could keep, that everything would be all right, that tomorrow would be warmer, that she would find food somehow. But as the cold bit through her own bones, even those promises felt fragile. People passed by, dressed in heavy coats and carrying shopping bags, their eyes sliding past her as though she didn't exist. For them, she was invisible, just another broken soul in the city. Across the street, a man walked with his little girl, their figures a sharp contrast to Maya's misery. Ethan Carter, a tall man with sharp features and a commanding presence, was known across the city as the successful young CEO of a thriving company. His life, at least to outsiders, appeared flawless, a man of wealth, power, and influence. But if anyone looked closer, they would see the faint shadows under his eyes, the weight of responsibilities that went beyond boardrooms. Since the death of his wife years ago, Ethan had lived for only two things: his company and his daughter, Lily. The little girl, only 7 years old, was his light, her innocent chatter and boundless curiosity keeping him grounded in a world that often demanded ruthlessness. On this cold night, she clung to his hand, her cheeks flushed pink from the cold, her laughter rising as she caught snowflakes on her mittens. To Ethan, she was the only reason he kept moving forward. But Lily's joy came to a sudden stop when her gaze caught the figure across the street. Her little body froze, her small hand tugging hard at her father's sleeve. "Daddy," she whispered, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and compassion, "look." Ethan followed her gaze and felt his steps falter. There, huddled on the frozen ground, was Maya, her face pale and tired, her eyes wide with desperation as she tried to shield her baby from the cold. For a brief moment, the world seemed to blur, the city lights dimming as Ethan's mind was pulled back to his own sleepless nights when Lily was a baby. He remembered holding her close, terrified she might slip away when fever burned her skin, and he had vowed never to let anything harm her. Now, seeing the young woman clutching her child as if sheer love could keep her alive, something stirred in him that no business deal or success had ever managed to awaken. Lily's small voice broke through his thoughts, stronger this time, "Daddy, her baby is freezing." The words pierced the night, echoing louder than the city traffic, leaving Ethan with a choice he could not ignore. Ethan stood frozen for a moment, torn between the instinctive caution of a man who lived in a world of power and appearances, and the raw human compassion awakened by his daughter's plea, but before he could act, Lily broke free from his grasp and ran across the snowy street, her small boots crunching against the ice as she hurried toward the woman and her baby. "Wait, Lily." Ethan called, his voice firm yet laced with panic, but the little girl was already kneeling beside Maya, her innocent eyes wide with worry. Without hesitation, she unwound the soft knitted scarf from her own neck and held it out with small trembling hands. "Here," she whispered, her breath forming clouds in the frigid air, "this will help keep your baby warm." Maya blinked in disbelief, her lips parting as tears welled in her eyes at the unexpected kindness. With hesitant fingers, she accepted the scarf, wrapping it gently around her baby, who whimpered softly but seemed to settle in the added warmth. "Thank you," Maya's voice cracked as she spoke, carrying the weight of exhaustion and gratitude, and Lily smiled with the simple purity of a child who saw no difference between herself and the shivering stranger. Ethan finally caught up, his expensive shoes crunching against the ice as he knelt beside them, his coat brushing against the filthy pavement without a thought to its value. He studied the woman carefully, her face was gaunt, her skin pale, and her eyes hollow with fatigue, yet the way she held her baby was fierce, protective, unyielding. "What's your name?" he asked gently, the edge usually present in his tone replaced with something softer. Maya hesitated, clutching the baby tighter, but something about the man's presence and the warmth in his daughter's eyes eased her guard. "Maya," she whispered at last, "and this is Emma." Ethan's eyes flickered to the infant, a fragile life caught between survival and despair, and memories of long nights holding Lily as an infant swept over him with startling clarity. The echo of those sleepless nights stirred something deep within him, something that had long been buried beneath business meetings and responsibilities. Without a second thought, Ethan shrugged off his heavy wool coat and draped it across Maya's shoulders, ensuring it covered Emma as well. "Come with us," he said firmly, leaving no room for argument. Maya shook her head quickly, shame flashing across her features. "I can't, people don't want someone like me near them," she murmured, her voice filled with resignation. Ethan's jaw tightened as he glanced at his daughter, who now sat close to Maya as if refusing to leave her side. "People might not," he replied, his voice steady and resolute, "but we do." For a moment, Maya stared at him, torn between distrust and hope, her lips trembling as she looked at the warm scarf from Lily and the heavy coat now shielding her baby. No one had spoken to her with such certainty in a long time, and for the first time in days, perhaps weeks, she felt the faint flicker of safety return. She nodded silently, clutching Emma close as tears slipped down her cheeks, and Ethan extended his hand to help her up, the first step of a journey none of them yet realized would change their lives forever. The ride back to Ethan's home was quiet, the hum of the car engine filling the silence as snow continued to fall outside, blanketing the city in white. Maya sat stiffly in the back seat, her baby bundled tightly in Ethan's coat, while Lily leaned close, humming softly as if to soothe both mother and child, and Ethan, gripping the steering wheel, found himself stealing glances in the rearview mirror, his mind turning over the surrealness of the situation, how a business dinner had turned into a rescue mission. When they pulled up to his mansion, its warm lights glowing against the night, Maya froze, her eyes wide with disbelief at the sheer grandeur before her, and shame burned in her chest as she realized how out of place she must look, her shoes caked with snow and mud, her clothes worn thin, yet Lily hopped out first and tugged her hand insistently, chirping, "Come on, it's warm inside." Almost stumbling, Maya followed, stepping into the spacious foyer where the polished floors reflected the golden light of chandeliers and the faint scent of pine from the fireplace lingered in the air, and though everything around her screamed of wealth she had never known, her attention stayed locked on Emma, who whimpered softly in her arms, the sound of need stronger than the fear of being judged. Ethan guided them to the living room, where the fireplace crackled invitingly, and gestured for Maya to sit, his voice calm and direct as though he sensed how close she was to bolting. She lowered herself onto the edge of the couch, clutching Emma tightly, and only when Ethan returned with steaming mugs of cocoa and a soft blanket did she begin to thaw, though the disbelief in her eyes lingered. At first, she barely touched the drink, but the warmth seeping from the mug into her frozen fingers brought tears to her eyes, and with a trembling breath she whispered her story, how she had lost her job at a diner when it shut down unexpectedly, how the landlord had thrown her out when she couldn't make rent, and how every shelter she tried was full or had turned her away, leaving her with no choice but the streets. Her voice cracked when she admitted she had gone hungry just to keep milk for Emma, and the shame in her eyes was unbearable. Ethan listened silently, his jaw tightening, and though he had dealt with countless negotiations in boardrooms, no story had ever struck him so deeply, because sitting across from him wasn't a beggar or a stranger, it was a mother doing everything in her power to keep her child alive. Meanwhile, Lily giggled softly as she played peekaboo with Emma, the baby's tired whimpers easing into tiny coos, and for the first time in months the sound of Lily's laughter filled the mansion, echoing through walls that had long been silent since his wife's passing. Ethan looked at the scene, realizing with startling clarity that his daughter had already chosen, and in her innocent heart Maya and Emma weren't outsiders, they belonged. The days that followed unfolded in a way Maya never could have imagined, as what began as a night of desperation turned slowly into a rhythm of belonging. Ethan had insisted she and baby Emma stay in one of the guest rooms, a space larger and warmer than anywhere she had ever lived, and though at first she felt like an intruder in a world far removed from hers, the gentle persistence of Lily and the quiet strength of Ethan slowly broke down the walls of her fear. Each morning, she would wake to the sound of Emma's soft coos, and instead of worrying where to find food or warmth, she would carry her baby down to the kitchen, where Lily sat waiting, eager to hold her little sister, as she had already begun to call her, and though Maya would protest shyly at the title, Ethan never corrected it, his eyes softening whenever he overheard. It wasn't long before Ethan, noticing the way Maya naturally cared for the children and how her patience never wavered, offered her a position at his company's daycare center, a role she hesitated to accept out of pride and doubt, but Ethan's steady voice reminded her, "This isn't charity, Maya, you deserve a chance to rebuild, and you have more strength than you realize." Slowly, she stepped into the role, her confidence growing each day as she not only provided for Emma but also began to rediscover herself, and every evening she would return to Ethan's home, where Lily would meet her at the door with hugs and Emma's laughter filled the once quiet halls. For Ethan, the change was profound. His house, once filled with silence broken only by the ticking of clocks and the shuffle of paperwork, now overflowed with life, Lily's giggles, Emma's tiny cries, and Maya's soft voice telling bedtime stories in the living room by the fire, stories that made Lily's eyelids droop until she nestled against Maya as though she had always been there. Ethan found himself watching them often, his heart stirring with emotions he had long buried after his wife's death, and though he was cautious, unwilling to mistake gratitude for something deeper, he couldn't deny the warmth Maya brought into their lives. One snowy evening, as the fire crackled and Lily lay curled against Maya's side, Emma asleep in her arms, Ethan sat quietly beside them, feeling the completeness of the moment settle into his chest like a long-awaited truth. Maya looked at him, her eyes shimmering with tears she tried to hide, and whispered, "I thought no one wanted someone like me near them, but you gave me and Emma more than a home, you gave us a reason to hope again." Ethan's voice was steady, yet thick with meaning, as he replied, "Maya, you saved us as much as we saved you." In that simple exchange, the distance between them vanished, and the mansion, once just walls of wealth and loneliness, became something far greater. It became a home, a place where broken pieces came together to form a new family bound not by blood, but by compassion, love, and the miracle of a child's innocent plea on a freezing winter night.